A rusted gas station had been abandoned for nearly 20 years. So why did a German shepherd refuse to leave one spot behind the counter? The flashlight trembles across the dusty floor as Boone slams his paw against the wood again. Outside, wind rattles the old fuel pumps, and somewhere beyond the dark windows, a branch snaps. Caleb drops to one knee, runs his fingers along a narrow seam in the wall, and feels something shift beneath the dust. Boone lets out a low growl. Then a metallic click echoes through the empty station. What do you think Boone found? The hammer struck steel 3 times. Clang, clang, clang. Caleb Turner was awake before he realized he had fallen asleep. His hand shot toward the flashlight tucked beside the driver's seat. His breathing stopped. His eyes searched the darkness beyond the windshield. For half a second, he wasn't in Wyoming. He was somewhere else. A convoy road, dust, heat, a radio crackling with broken voices. Then the 4th hammer strike came from a construction site across the parking lot. The illusion shattered. Caleb slowly lowered the flashlight. Just a hammer, he muttered. Boone lifted his head from Caleb's leg and looked up at him with tired amber eyes. The German shepherd didn't move until Caleb's breathing settled. Only then did he rest his head back on Caleb's boot. Yeah, Caleb whispered. I'm all right. The lie sounded familiar. Morning light crept across the cracked dashboard of the old Ford F-150. The truck had become home 2 years ago. A blanket behind the seats, a small cooler, a duffel bag, a coffee thermos. Everything Caleb owned fit inside the cab. At 72 years old, he had learned how little a man truly needed, or maybe how much a man could lose. He rubbed a hand across his gray beard and studied the nearly empty parking lot. Habit made him check every angle before opening the door. Front, rear-view mirror, driver's side, passenger side. No movement, no surprises. Clear. Only then did he step out. The autumn air carried the smell of cold asphalt and distant pine trees. Boone jumped down beside him. The dog's left ear twitched toward every sound. Not nervous, aware. Caleb sometimes thought Boone understood the world better than most people. His phone buzzed inside his pocket. The county attorney's office. He almost ignored it. Instead, he answered. 10 minutes later, he stood outside a small courthouse holding a thick manila envelope. Inside was the last thing he expected. The deed to an old gas station. His father's gas station. The property sat deep in the Wyoming mountains, on a forgotten stretch of road few people used anymore. The attorney explained the paperwork. Taxes were current. Ownership was clean. The station belonged to him now. That was it. No savings, no trust fund, no hidden accounts, just an abandoned building. Caleb stared at the deed. His father had been gone almost 18 years. They hadn't spoken much during the last decade of his life. Military deployments, long-haul trucking jobs, distance, excuses. Now all that remained was a signature on yellowed paper. By noon, he was sitting in a diner eating eggs he could barely taste. His daughter, Rachel, called halfway through the meal. "You got the property?" she asked. "I did." "You should sell it, straight to the point." That was Rachel. Caleb looked out the window. "I haven't even seen it yet." "Dad, it's been abandoned forever." "Probably. You need money, not another problem." She wasn't wrong. His checking account contained less than $300. The truck needed brakes. Winter was coming. Everything practical pointed toward selling, yet something held him still. "I'll look at it first," he said. Rachel sighed. "Just don't get attached." After the call ended, Caleb sat there for a long time. Boone rested beneath the table. The waitress brought him coffee without asking. He drank it black, the way his father always had. 3 hours later, the Ford climbed into the mountains. The highway narrowed, then narrowed again. Civilization faded behind him. Pine forests swallowed the horizon. Rocky ridges rose on both sides of the road. The farther he drove, the quieter the world became. The silence felt strange. Good strange. Boone stood with his front paws on the passenger seat, staring through the windshield. The old dog hadn't moved in nearly 20 minutes. The road curved around a hillside. Then Caleb saw it. Far ahead, barely visible through drifting afternoon mist, a weathered building, a rusted sign, 2 forgotten fuel pumps standing like ghosts beside the road. The gas station. His father's gas station. Caleb eased off the accelerator. Beside him, Boone suddenly stood rigid. His ears lifted. His body went perfectly still. Not excitement, not fear, recognition. The dog stared toward the station as if he had noticed something Caleb couldn't see. Something waiting there, something hidden. The mountains fell silent around them. And for the first time in years, Caleb felt the faint pull of a road he had not chosen, but somehow needed to follow. The old Ford rolled slowly toward the station. Boone never took his eyes off it. Not once. The old Ford rolled to a stop beside the rusted pumps. For a moment, neither Caleb nor Boone moved. The station sat in the fading afternoon light, like something forgotten by time itself. The hand-painted sign above the entrance was barely readable. Turner Gas and Service. The white paint had peeled away in long strips. Rust streaked down the metal brackets holding it in place. One corner hung lower than the other. Caleb shut off the engine. Silence settled across the mountains. No traffic. No voices. Only wind moving through pine trees somewhere beyond the ridge. He stepped out first. Boone followed immediately. The dog circled once, nose low to the ground, taking in every scent. Then he stopped. The front door. His attention locked onto it. Caleb grabbed his duffel bag and walked toward the building. The porch boards groaned under his boots. He pulled the ring of inherited keys from his pocket. The metal felt cold, older than he remembered. His father's handwriting was still visible on a small piece of faded tape wrapped around one key. Front. Just one word. The lock resisted, then gave way with a sharp click. The sound echoed through the empty station. Caleb pushed the door open. A stale breath of air rolled out. Dust, old wood, motor oil, coffee. Somehow, even after all these years, there was still coffee in the smell. Boone entered first. Careful, measured. His nails clicked softly across the worn floor. Caleb followed. The station looked exactly wrong. Not destroyed. Not abandoned. Paused. As if somebody had stepped outside for 5 minutes and never returned. Sunlight pushed through dirty windows and stretched across the floor in long golden rectangles. The old cooler against the wall still carried faded soda advertisements. A rack of road maps leaned crookedly near the entrance. Behind the counter sat a mechanical cash register. And beside it, Caleb stopped breathing for a second. His father's reading glasses. Still there. Resting exactly where they had been left. One temple slightly bent. The same pair Earl Turner had worn every day for nearly 20 years. Caleb slowly walked over. His fingers brushed the frame. Dust coated the lenses. But otherwise nothing had changed. He remembered those glasses slipping down his father's nose while he worked crossword puzzles during slow afternoons. He remembered complaining about it as a teenager. He remembered his father laughing. The memory arrived so suddenly it hurt. Boone wandered behind the counter. His nose moved constantly, back and forth, studying everything. Caleb looked away. A folded highway map from 2003 remained pinned beneath a coffee mug. A calendar hung on the wall. June. 18 years ago. The month Earl Turner died. Nobody had turned the page since. The realization sat heavy in the room. Caleb lowered himself onto a stool behind the counter. Dust swirled through the sunlight. Outside, the mountains stood exactly where they always had. Everything else felt different. His phone showed one missed call from Rachel. He didn't return it. Not yet. Instead, he sat there listening. The building creaked softly around him, like an old ship settling into water. As evening approached, Caleb explored the rest of the property. The attached garage stood behind the station. Its large bay doors were weathered but intact. Inside sat tool cabinets, workbenches, and equipment covered by canvas sheets. Everything carried a layer of dust, yet nothing appeared looted, nothing vandalized. His father had somehow been left alone, even after death. That fact surprised him. As darkness fell, Caleb carried a folding chair into the station. He found an old flashlight in his truck, a lantern, a blanket. Nothing more. He wasn't planning to stay long. Just one night. Maybe two. Then he would decide what came next. The mountain temperature dropped quickly after sunset. Wind rattled loose metal somewhere outside. Boone curled up near the front door. Caleb sat behind the counter. The lantern threw warm shadows across the room. Eventually, exhaustion won. His eyes closed. For a little while. A metallic crash snapped him awake. Caleb was standing before he realized he had moved. Flashlight already in hand, heart hammering, every muscle tight. Darkness filled the station. For half a second, the sound became something else. A vehicle strike. A damaged convoy. Contact. Then reality returned. Wind. Just wind. Boone was already on his feet. Ears forward. Silent. Waiting. Caleb grabbed the flashlight and stepped outside. The cold air hit immediately. He moved through the property the same way he always had. Checking corners, watching sightlines, scanning shadows. The old habits never left. Not after Iraq. Not after years of learning that danger often appeared where nobody expected it. The flashlight beam swept across the pumps, the garage, the tree line. Nothing. No movement. No vehicles. No people. Just wind pushing an old sheet of corrugated metal against the side of the building. That had been the noise. Caleb exhaled slowly. "Clear," he whispered. Boone remained alert beside him. The dog wasn't interested in the metal. His attention kept drifting elsewhere. Toward the station. Toward the front counter. Back inside, Caleb tried sleeping again. Hours passed. The lantern burned low. Around midnight, he opened his eyes. Boone was no longer lying by the door. The German shepherd stood behind the counter, completely focused, his nose pressed against one specific corner near the floor. Then he scratched. Once, twice, 3 times. Wood splintered softly beneath his paw. Caleb sat up. "Boone?" The dog scratched again. Then again. Like he had found something. Or smelled something. Something hidden. Caleb rose slowly and walked toward the counter. Boone never looked away from the corner. Not even when Caleb reached him. The old dog scratched one more time. And beneath the lantern's fading glow, Caleb noticed something he had somehow missed earlier. A seam in the wood. Perfectly straight. Perfectly deliberate. Like part of the counter wasn't really part of the counter at all. Boone placed one paw against it, then looked up at Caleb. Waiting. As if he'd just found the first piece of a puzzle neither of them understood yet. Outside, the mountain wind continued to whisper through the darkness. Inside, the station seemed to hold its breath. Caleb crouched beside Boone. The lantern's glow stretched across the worn floorboards, revealing the straight seam hidden beneath decades of dust. The dog remained perfectly still. One paw rested against the wood. Waiting, Caleb ran his fingers along the edge. It wasn't damage. It wasn't age. Someone had built this. Deliberately, he glanced at the clock on the wall. Almost 1 a.m. Any sensible man would have waited until daylight. But curiosity had a way of keeping old soldiers awake. He found a flathead screwdriver in his truck. The metal edge slipped into the seam. A little pressure. A dry crack. Then the panel shifted. Dust drifted into the lantern light. The hidden compartment wasn't large. Only a shallow cavity beneath the counter. Inside sat several weathered notebooks wrapped in oilcloth. Nothing else. No money. No valuables. No explanation. Caleb carefully lifted the bundle out. Boone immediately began sniffing inside the compartment again, as if he wasn't finished searching. "One thing at a time, partner." The German shepherd huffed softly, but stayed close. Caleb carried the notebooks onto the counter. The first cover was cracked black leather. His father's handwriting appeared across the front. January 1997. He opened it. The pages were filled with names, dates, addresses, short notes. At first he thought it was a customer ledger. Then he started reading. March 14th. Repaired transmission for Tom Wheeler. No charge. Baby due next month. Needs every dollar he can keep. April 2nd. Fuel delivery to Jenkins Farm. Winter killed half the herd. Pay whenever they can. Or don't. May 18th. Bought groceries for Mrs. Dunlap. Told her it was a promotion from the soda company. She knew better. Pretended not to. Caleb stared at the page, then turned another, and another, and another. Every entry followed the same pattern. Not debts, needs, not profits. People. The deeper he read, the quieter the station became. His father had spent years keeping track of everyone around him. Who lost a job, who needed medicine, whose truck broke down during calving season, whose furnace failed before winter. Small acts, tiny entries, yet together they painted an entirely different picture of Earl Turner. A man Caleb wasn't sure he'd ever truly known. By dawn, he had read nearly half the first notebook. The mountains outside glowed pale blue beneath the coming sunrise. Boone slept beside the counter. His head rested across Caleb's boots. The old dog had earned his rest. Caleb stepped outside carrying a mug of instant coffee. Cold air rolled down from the ridges. The sky brightened behind the pine trees. For years, mornings had started inside truck stops, parking lots, and rest areas. This felt different. He couldn't explain why. The station looked less abandoned in daylight. Lonely, maybe, but not dead. Around mid-morning, the sound of an approaching vehicle echoed through the valley. Caleb looked up. A battered ranch truck climbed the gravel shoulder and stopped beside the pumps. An elderly woman stepped out. Gray hair, work gloves, heavy boots, the kind of face carved by Wyoming weather. She stared at the station, then at Caleb. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, she smiled. "You're Earl's boy." It wasn't a question. Caleb nodded. The woman laughed softly. "Took you long enough?" She extended her hand. Martha Jenkins. The name immediately sounded familiar. Fuel delivery to Jenkins Farm. Winter killed half the herd. Caleb remembered reading it only hours earlier. "My father knew you." Martha snorted. "Your father knew everybody." She looked toward the building. I heard somebody was finally here. News travels fast. In these mountains? Faster than the internet. For the next hour, they sat on overturned buckets outside the station. Martha drank coffee from a thermos she carried in her truck. Most of the conversation centered around Earl. Story after story, memory after memory. The time he drove through a blizzard to deliver diesel to stranded ranchers. The time he rebuilt a school bus engine over a weekend so children wouldn't miss classes. The time he quietly paid veterinary bills for a neighbor who never learned where the money came from. Caleb listened, mostly because he didn't know what to say. Eventually, Martha studied him over the rim of her cup. You know why people came here? For gas? She shook her head. No. A breeze moved through the pines. Far below, sunlight spread across the valley floor. They came because of your father. The words landed harder than Caleb expected. Martha stood, brushed dust from her jeans, then headed toward her truck. Before climbing inside, she paused. People around here still remember him. She looked at the station one last time. Question is whether they'll remember you. Then she drove away. The truck disappeared around the bend. Silence returned. Caleb found himself staring at the building, at the faded sign, at the pumps, at the garage. All day he cleaned, not because he planned to stay. At least that's what he told himself. Dust filled the air. Windows opened. Sunlight returned to corners that hadn't seen it in years. By evening, he'd finished the main room. Boone spent most of the day investigating. Every room, every corner, every shelf. Twice, Caleb caught the dog returning to the same section beneath the counter, the hidden compartment. Something still bothered him. Near sunset, Boone suddenly began digging beside the baseboard. Hard, focused. His paws scraped wood and dust across the floor. Boone. The dog ignored him. Boone. Still digging. Caleb walked over. The German shepherd stepped aside. A small object rolled across the floorboards. Metal. Old. Half buried beneath years of dirt. Caleb picked it up, a brass key. Tiny. Unlike any key on the ring from the courthouse. He turned it over in the fading light. There were no markings, no label, no explanation. Just a key. Boone stared at it, then looked toward the counter, then toward the back of the station, as though he already knew where it belonged. Outside, darkness settled across the Wyoming mountains, and somewhere inside the old station, another secret was waiting. The brass key felt heavier than it should have. Caleb sat behind the counter, turning it between his fingers while Boone watched from the floor. The dog hadn't taken his eyes off the back half of the station since sunset. Every few minutes his ears twitched, not toward the road, not toward the woods, toward the building itself, as if he could hear something hidden beneath years of silence. The lantern cast long shadows across the room. Caleb studied the key again. Old brass, hand-filed edges, not something bought recently, something that had belonged here. The question was where. He stood and grabbed a flashlight. Let's see what you've got us into, partner. Boone immediately got to his feet. Together they moved through the station. The storage room first. Nothing. The office. Nothing. The apartment upstairs. Several locked drawers. Wrong size. The key didn't fit. The garage. Still nothing. Nearly an hour passed before Caleb found himself back behind the counter, the same place Boone kept returning. The dog suddenly walked past him, straight toward the wall behind the register. He stopped beside a narrow section of wood paneling, then looked back. Waiting. Caleb crouched. There. A tiny brass lock hidden beneath a lip of trim. small enough to miss unless you were searching for it. His pulse quickened. The key slid in smoothly. One turn. A click. The panel shifted outward. Boone immediately stepped back. Caleb pulled the hidden door open. Dust floated into the lantern light. Inside sat a shallow compartment stretching nearly 3 feet into the wall. Rows of carefully stacked envelopes, several folders, old photographs, and a heavy steel cash box, the kind farmers used decades ago. For a long moment, Caleb simply stared. His father had hidden this from everyone, including him. He lifted the first envelope. The paper had yellowed with age. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. Earl Turner. The letter inside was from a woman named Susan Parker. Thank you for fixing my transmission after Robert passed. I know you said not to mention it again, but my boys still talk about that Christmas. Without your help, we would have lost the truck. Without the truck, we would have lost the ranch. God bless you. Caleb opened another, and another. Each told a similar story. Families, hard times, unexpected help, no publicity, no recognition, just quiet kindness. The photographs showed smiling people standing beside repaired trucks, children holding fishing poles, families gathered around picnic tables. Earl Turner appeared in some of them, always near the edge, never in the center. The steel box remained locked. Caleb tried the brass key. Wrong size. Something else opened it. Something still missing. A sudden growl froze him. Low. Deep. Boone. The dog stood rigid near the front windows, his eyes fixed on the darkness outside. Every muscle tightened. Caleb immediately killed the lantern. Darkness swallowed the station. Years of habit took over. He didn't rush, didn't move, just listened. The station disappeared around him. His breathing slowed, the way it always had before entering uncertain situations overseas. Watch. Listen. Wait. Boone never stopped staring. Caleb moved carefully toward the window. Not directly. Off angle. Using the reflection in the glass. The darkness outside slowly sharpened. The gravel lot. The pumps. The tree line. Then, movement. A silhouette. Standing near the edge of the property, watching the station. The figure remained there only a second, maybe 2, then vanished into the darkness. Caleb's pulse jumped. By the time he reached the door and stepped outside, whoever it was had disappeared. The flashlight beam swept across the lot. Nothing. The pumps. Nothing. The road. Empty. The trees swayed softly beneath the moonlight. No vehicle sounds. No voices. No footsteps, only Boone's low growl continuing beside him. Caleb walked the perimeter anyway. One slow circuit, then another. The old military habits returned effortlessly. Checking angles, looking for disturbed ground, studying likely observation points. Someone had been there. He was certain of it. But certainty wasn't evidence. Not yet. The next morning, dawn arrived cold and clear. The mountains glowed gold beneath the rising sun. Caleb carried a mug of coffee outside and began searching the gravel. Boone followed closely. Near the north side of the lot, he found them. Footprints. Fresh. One set. Boot prints. Large. Heading toward the tree line. Whoever had been watching the station wasn't a passing traveler. They had walked in and walked out. Deliberately. Caleb crouched beside the tracks. Boone sniffed them, then looked toward the forest. The hair along his back lifted slightly. The old soldier inside Caleb stirred. Not fear, awareness. Somebody knew about the station. Somebody had enough interest to watch it after dark. The question was why. He spent the morning organizing the contents of the hidden compartment. More letters, more stories, more proof that his father had quietly helped half the valley. By noon, the counter was covered in envelopes and photographs. The station no longer felt abandoned. It felt occupied. Not by ghosts, by memory. Yet the footprints lingered in Caleb's thoughts. So did the locked steel box, and the stranger who had disappeared into the trees. That evening, Boone settled beside the front door. But unlike previous nights, he didn't relax. Every few minutes he glanced toward the road, listening, waiting, as if he knew something Caleb didn't. Outside, the Wyoming mountains stood silent beneath the fading sky. And somewhere beyond the tree line, someone else was thinking about the station too. Caleb slept lightly that night. Not because of the cold, not because of the old building settling around him. It was the footprints, the stranger, the feeling that the station had become important to someone besides him. Boone slept near the front door. At least he appeared to. Twice during the night, Caleb woke to find the German shepherd sitting upright, staring through the dark windows toward the road. Watching, waiting. The way old soldiers sometimes did. Morning arrived wrapped in low clouds. The mountains disappeared behind drifting fog. Caleb opened the front door and stepped onto the porch with a mug of coffee. The gravel lot sat empty. The footprints remained visible near the tree line. No new tracks, no answers. By mid-morning, the first truck arrived. Then another. Then another. At first, Caleb assumed word had simply spread that someone was cleaning the station. But after the third visitor, he realized something else was happening. People weren't coming to see him. They were coming to see Earl Turner. The first man introduced himself as Roy Peterson, 80 years old, former cattle rancher. He walked slowly with a cane and spent nearly 10 minutes staring at the old gas pumps before speaking. "Your father pulled my wife out of a snowbank in 1998. Caleb leaned against the porch railing. Roy nodded toward the mountains. Whiteout conditions. Nobody should have been driving. "What happened?" Roy smiled. "Your father happened." The old man laughed softly. Said he was heading home when he saw her headlights in a ditch. Roy looked toward the station. He spent 6 hours digging her truck out with a shovel. Caleb listened. Roy continued. He never charged a penny. The old rancher removed his hat, held it for a moment, then quietly added, "She made it home because of him." By noon, 2 more people had stopped by, then 4, then 6. Every story sounded different, yet somehow they all sounded the same. A broken transmission fixed during calving season. A heating bill paid anonymously during a brutal winter. A stranded truck driver given a place to sleep. A family fed when nobody else knew they were struggling. The names inside Earl's notebooks were suddenly standing in front of Caleb. Alive. Older now, but still remembering. Boone moved among them quietly, accepting scratches behind the ears, leaning against weathered legs, listening to stories he couldn't understand, but somehow seemed connected to. Late that afternoon, a battered white RV crawled into the lot, trailing blue smoke. The engine sounded terrible. The vehicle rolled to a stop beside the garage. A young man climbed out. Maybe 30, lean, sunburned, dark circles beneath tired eyes. He looked like somebody who hadn't slept well in months. Caleb recognized the look. The man opened the hood. Steam drifted upward. Boone immediately trotted over. The stranger scratched behind the dog's ears. "You've got good taste, buddy." Caleb walked across the lot. Radiator? The young man glanced up. Looks like it. Need help? The stranger hesitated. People who lived rough often hesitated before accepting help. Eventually, he nodded. My name's Logan. Caleb. They shook hands. Together, they looked over the engine. The upper radiator hose had nearly split apart. The repair wasn't complicated. Finding parts in the middle of nowhere was another matter. To Logan's surprise, Caleb located an old replacement hose inside the garage inventory, one of Earl's forgotten spare parts. 2 hours later, the RV was running again. Logan stared at the engine, then at Caleb. How much do I owe you? Caleb thought about it, then shrugged. Nothing. The younger man blinked. No charge? My father would have done the same. Logan looked toward the station. A strange expression crossed his face. Respect. Maybe disbelief, maybe both. As the afternoon faded, Logan helped Caleb organize tools inside the garage. He knew engines, worked fast, paid attention. By sunset, the two men had cleared nearly half the workbench. You planning to reopen this place? Logan asked. I don't know. You should. Caleb smiled. Why? Logan looked around. The garage, the pumps, the mountains beyond the lot. Because places like this don't exist anymore. The answer stayed with Caleb long after the conversation ended. That evening, the visitors finally stopped coming. The station grew quiet again. The mountains turned blue beneath the setting sun. Boone lay on the porch, half asleep. Caleb sat beside him. For the first time since arriving, the station felt less abandoned. Not alive yet, but no longer forgotten. The hidden letters, the notebooks, the stories. They had changed something, not in the building, in him. Darkness settled over the valley. One by one, the stars appeared. Caleb was about to head inside when he noticed something near the front door. An envelope, plain white. No stamp, no address, no name. Just an envelope resting against the threshold. Boone immediately stood. His ears went forward. Caleb crossed the porch, picked it up, opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. One sentence, typed in black ink. Sell the gas station before it's too late. Nothing else. No signature. No explanation. The evening suddenly felt colder. Caleb slowly looked toward the dark road, then toward the tree line where the footprints had appeared. Boone stepped beside him. The dog's eyes remained fixed on the darkness, watching. The same way he had watched on that first day, as if he already knew the trouble was getting closer. Caleb slept with the envelope on the counter beside his father's reading glasses, not because he needed to see it, because he didn't trust it. Sometime after midnight, he woke without knowing why. The station was dark. The lantern had burned out hours earlier. For several seconds, he lay perfectly still on the old cot he'd dragged downstairs, listening. A habit learned long ago. Not every danger announced itself. Sometimes the silence changed first. Beside the door, Boone was already awake. The German shepherd stood motionless, head raised, ears forward. A low rumble vibrated deep in his chest. Caleb slowly sat up. Outside, the wind had died. The mountains were silent. Then he heard it. A vehicle. Far away. Moving without headlights. The sound barely carried through the darkness. An engine. Slow. Careful. His pulse sharpened. Boone's growl deepened. Caleb slipped his boots on and grabbed the flashlight he kept within arm's reach. The same flashlight he'd carried through truck yards and lonely rest stops for years. The engine noise disappeared. That bothered him more than hearing it. Whoever was out there had stopped. The old soldier inside him immediately began building possibilities. Lost traveler, hunter, rancher, or someone who didn't want to be seen. He crossed the room without turning on a light. Boone moved beside him. Together they stood near the window. Watching. Waiting. At first Caleb saw nothing. Then movement. Near the fuel storage shed behind the station, a shadow. A person. The figure crouched beside the padlocked door. Metal scraped softly against metal. The lock. Someone was working on the lock. Caleb's jaw tightened. The fuel shed contained old equipment, spare parts, and several fuel drums left from years ago. Not valuable, but important. Important enough that someone shouldn't be there. Boone suddenly barked. One sharp explosion of sound. The figure froze. Caleb immediately swung open the front door. "Hey!" The shadow bolted, running toward the trees. Fast. Boone launched forward before Caleb could stop him. The German shepherd flew across the gravel lot. The stranger glanced back, then disappeared around the corner of the shed. Caleb followed. His knees weren't what they used to be, but adrenaline had a way of borrowing strength from tomorrow. He rounded the building. The flashlight beam bounced across gravel. Trees, fence posts, movement. There. The stranger sprinted toward the tree line. Boone closed the distance rapidly. The dog was faster, much faster. For a moment Caleb thought Boone might catch him. Then the man suddenly turned. Something flashed in his hand. A steel pipe. The swing came hard, too hard. The metal connected with Boone's shoulder. A sharp yelp cut through the night. The sound hit Caleb harder than any punch. Boone tumbled across the gravel. The attacker dropped the pipe and disappeared into the darkness, gone before Caleb could reach him. "Boone!" The dog struggled to stand. One front leg hung awkwardly. Blood darkened his fur near the shoulder. Not much, but enough. Far too much. Caleb knelt beside him immediately. His hands moved automatically. The same calm focus he'd relied on during emergencies overseas. Assess. Control. Treat. Boone whined softly, but never tried to pull away. The flashlight illuminated a long cut where the edge of the pipe had torn through skin. Painful. Messy. But not catastrophic. Thank God. "Stay with me, buddy." The dog pressed his head against Caleb's chest. The simple gesture nearly broke him. Together they made their way back inside. The station suddenly felt much larger, much emptier. Caleb pulled an old military first aid kit from the truck. The expiration dates were ancient. The skills weren't. He cleaned the wound, flushed debris, applied pressure. Boone never snapped, never growled, just watched him with complete trust. At one point, Caleb's hands trembled, not from the injury, from the realization of how close it could have been. The attacker hadn't aimed for Caleb. He'd hit Boone, the one creature that had never left, the one living thing still choosing to stay. Hours passed. The mountains outside turned from black to gray, then gray to blue. Dawn arrived. Neither of them had slept. Boone finally drifted off near sunrise, his breathing slow and steady. Caleb sat beside him on the floor, coffee untouched, eyes fixed on the door. The attack changed something. Until now, the threats had felt distant. Footprints, letters, shadows, warnings. Now there was blood on the floor. Now there was a damaged lock hanging from the fuel shed. Now somebody had crossed a line. The station was no longer simply an inheritance. It was becoming a target. Around mid-morning, Martha Jenkins arrived. One look at Boone and her face hardened. "What happened?" Caleb told her. "Not every detail." "Enough." Martha listened quietly, then walked outside to inspect the damaged lock herself. When she returned, she looked older than she had the day before. "Your father had trouble once," she said. Caleb looked up. "What kind of trouble?" She hesitated. "The kind that follows land." The answer raised more questions than it solved. Before he could ask another, Martha glanced toward the mountains, then toward the road, as if checking whether someone might be listening. "Be careful, Caleb." She looked down at Boone sleeping beside him. "Both of you." The warning lingered long after she left. That evening, the envelope remained on the counter. The words seemed different now. Not a threat, a promise. "Sell the gas station before it's too late." Caleb folded the paper carefully, then slipped it into one of Earl Turner's old notebooks. Outside, the sun disappeared behind the mountains. Inside, Boone slept with a bandaged shoulder. And for the first time since arriving, Caleb understood something with absolute certainty. Whoever wanted the station wasn't going away. They were just getting started. The next 3 days passed beneath low gray clouds and the steady smell of rain. Boone's shoulder slowly improved. The cut was healing. The limp remained. Even so, the German Shepherd refused to stay inside. Every morning he insisted on making a slow patrol around the property. The fuel shed, the garage, the pumps, the tree line, the same route, the same routine. Caleb never stopped him. Some habits were stronger than injuries. Truthfully, watching Boone move through the station gave Caleb a strange sense of comfort, like having another set of eyes, another guard on duty. Logan returned 2 days after the attack. The old RV rattled into the lot shortly after sunrise. He climbed out carrying a cardboard tray of coffee. "I figured you could use this." Caleb accepted one cup. "Thanks." Logan spotted Boone's bandaged shoulder almost immediately. "What happened?" The explanation made the younger man's jaw tighten. "People are breaking into a gas station nobody's used in 20 years? Looks that way." Logan looked around. The pumps, the mountains, the road. That doesn't make much sense. No, it doesn't. For most of the day, they worked in the garage, cleaning, sorting tools, testing old equipment. Logan turned out to be exactly what Caleb needed: quiet, capable, comfortable around silence. By afternoon, they had nearly half the garage functioning again. The old air compressor even came back to life after a stubborn fight with rust and wiring. When it finally roared awake, the sudden burst of noise hit Caleb harder than expected. For an instant, the garage disappeared. A different sound filled his ears. Engines, radio chatter, metal rattling over rough roads. Baghdad. Years ago. The memory flashed through him before he could stop it. Boone immediately looked up. The dog crossed the garage and rested his head against Caleb's leg, grounding him, bringing him back. Logan pretended not to notice. Caleb appreciated that. Not everything needed words. Around 4 in the afternoon, a black SUV appeared on the road. Unlike most vehicles that stopped at the station, this one looked expensive, polished, new, completely out of place among ranch trucks and work vehicles. The SUV rolled slowly into the lot, then stopped. A man stepped out. Late 50s. Tall. Gray suit despite the mountain road. Confident posture. The kind of man who expected people to move aside when he entered a room. Boone immediately stood, not growling, not barking, watching. The man's eyes briefly settled on the dog, then shifted to Caleb. "Mr. Turner." It wasn't a question. Caleb wiped his hands on a rag. Depends who's asking. The man smiled. Professional. Practiced. My name is Victor Hale. Something in the name sounded familiar. Caleb couldn't place it. Not yet. Victor removed a pair of sunglasses. I own Hale Development. Still nothing. The man glanced around the property, taking inventory, calculating, the same way investors looked at buildings before making offers. You've done quite a bit of work already, trying to keep busy. Victor smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. I imagine you've discovered the land is more valuable than it appears. There it was, the real reason. Caleb folded his arms. Is that right? Victor stepped toward the pumps. Wyoming's Department of Transportation has been studying a new scenic highway route. He pointed toward the valley. The proposed road would pass less than a mile from here. Logan stopped working, listening now. Victor continued. Tourism, development, traffic. His gaze settled on the station. This property could become extremely valuable. Caleb said nothing. Victor seemed comfortable filling silence. I'd like to buy it. There it was, plain and simple. The station, the land, the reason someone had been watching. Victor named a number. It was more money than Caleb had seen in years. Enough to buy a small home. Enough to stop living paycheck to paycheck. Enough to solve problems. For a moment, the offer lingered in the air. Then Caleb looked at Boone. The dog stood beside the garage door, bandaged, still recovering from protecting this place. The image made the decision easy. No. Victor blinked. Perhaps people didn't tell him no very often. You should think about it. I did. Victor's smile faded. The mountains seemed quieter suddenly. Even the wind had disappeared. You may not understand the situation. Caleb met his gaze. I understand it just fine. For the first time, something cold appeared behind Victor's expression. Not anger. Calculation. The same look Caleb had seen in corporate executives and military contractors years ago. Men who viewed everything as an asset. Everything as a transaction. Victor glanced toward the station, then back at Caleb. Your father wasn't interested either. That got Caleb's attention. You knew my father? Victor nodded. Several years ago. How many? Around 12. Interesting. The station had already been closed, yet Victor had still been interested. Why? As if sensing the question, Victor adjusted his jacket. Earl Turner was a stubborn man. So I've heard. Victor's smile returned. Smaller this time. Sharper. Unfortunately, there may be complications regarding ownership. The words landed carefully, deliberately. Caleb felt something tighten inside him. What kind of complications? Victor shrugged. Legal ones. Then he said the sentence that stayed with Caleb long after the SUV disappeared down the mountain road. You're not the only person with paperwork connected to this property. The vehicle vanished around the bend. Silence returned. Logan stared after it. Who was that guy? Caleb didn't answer immediately, because he was still thinking about Victor's final words, about the footprints, the envelope, the attack, the fuel shed. Suddenly they felt connected, like separate pieces of a picture slowly coming into focus. Just before sunset, a county courier truck climbed the road. The driver stepped out holding a large certified envelope. Caleb signed for it. The moment he saw the legal seal on the front, his stomach sank. Boone pressed against his leg. Caleb opened the envelope. Inside sat a formal court notice, a lawsuit, filed that morning. The plaintiff, Victor Hale. The claim, a dispute regarding ownership and inheritance rights connected to Turner Gas and Service. The Wyoming wind moved through the valley. The pages fluttered slightly in Caleb's hands. Across the lot, the mountains darkened beneath approaching clouds. And for the first time since arriving, Caleb realized this fight was no longer happening in the shadows. It had just stepped into the open. The legal documents remained on the counter all night. Beside them sat Earl Turner's reading glasses. The contrast bothered Caleb. One represented everything his father had spent a lifetime building. The other represented someone trying to take it away. Boone slept near the counter. His injured shoulder twitched occasionally during dreams. Each movement pulled Caleb's eyes back toward him. The dog would heal, the lawsuit was another matter. At sunrise, Caleb drove into town. The courthouse sat beside a hardware store and a diner that hadn't changed much since the 1980s. The clerk behind the counter recognized the case immediately. That wasn't encouraging. She printed several documents, property records, filing notices, court dates. The stack grew thicker by the minute. Each page seemed to cost something. Time, money, hope. By the time Caleb returned to the station, a headache had settled behind his eyes. Logan was waiting outside. Any good news? Caleb handed him the paperwork. Logan skimmed a few pages. His expression darkened. This guy isn't messing around. No. What are you going to do? Caleb looked toward the mountains. The honest answer sat heavily in his chest. I don't know. That afternoon, Rachel called. He almost didn't answer. Almost. How bad is it? She asked immediately. News traveled faster than weather in small Wyoming counties. Bad enough. There was silence. Then came the words he'd been expecting. Dad. Maybe it's time. He leaned against the station wall. Time for what? To sell. The word landed like a stone. Rachel continued carefully. You don't have money for lawyers. I know. You don't have savings. I know. This could drag on for months. Caleb closed his eyes. Everything she said was true. Every single word. That made it worse, because truth was harder to argue with. I'm just worried about you. Her voice softened. I don't want to watch you lose everything again. Again. The word lingered after the call ended. Lose everything again. The house, the retirement savings, the years spent sleeping in a truck, the medical bills, the loneliness. He had survived all of it. Barely. Now another fight stood in front of him. One more battle. One more uphill road. The question was whether he had anything left to give. That evening, a cold rain swept across the mountains. The station roof rattled beneath the weather. Inside, Caleb sat behind the counter reading through Earl's notebooks. Page after page, story after story. People helped. Lives changed. Small acts that never appeared in newspapers. The kind of things nobody measured anymore. His father's handwriting remained steady throughout. Even during difficult years. Even when business slowed. Even when money was tight. The notebooks never spoke about giving up. Caleb wished they did, because then maybe he could. The old radio suddenly crackled, a burst of static. Nothing more. Yet the sound hit him like a hammer. Instantly, he was somewhere else. A convoy yard outside Baghdad. Night operations, generators humming, radios spitting fragmented messages, someone shouting coordinates, someone else calling for support. His heart accelerated. The station disappeared. The rain disappeared. The years disappeared. For a moment, everything became noise, movement, pressure, memory. Caleb jerked upright. His breathing shortened. The radio crackled again. Boone was already moving. The German shepherd crossed the room despite his injured shoulder. He placed both front paws against Caleb's legs, then rested his head firmly against the old veteran's chest. Solid, real, present. Caleb focused on the dog's breathing. In, out, in, out. Slowly, the station returned. The counter, the lantern, the rain, the mountains. Boone stayed there until the shaking stopped. Only then did he lower himself beside the chair. Caleb rubbed behind the dog's ears. "Thanks, partner." The dog's tail thumped once. The gesture felt small. It wasn't. Outside, darkness settled over the valley. The rain continued. The lawsuit sat waiting. The threat remained real. For the first time since arriving, Caleb considered something he hadn't allowed himself to think before. Maybe Rachel was right. Maybe Victor Hale would eventually win. Maybe the station wasn't worth losing himself over. The thought followed him upstairs to the small apartment above the station. It followed him into bed. It followed him through the long hours of darkness. Near dawn, he finally slept, only to wake from another dream. Dust, sirens, heat, the smell of burning fuel. A convoy halted on a distant road. Faces he'd never forgotten, faces he'd never stopped carrying. Caleb sat upright, sweat cooling on his skin. The room was dark. The station below remained silent. Boone was already awake, watching him. The same steady gaze, the same loyalty, the same trust. Outside, the first pale light touched the mountain ridges. A new day was beginning. But for the first time since finding the station, Caleb Turner wasn't thinking about saving it. He was wondering if he still had the strength to fight for it at all. The thought followed him through breakfast, through the morning, through every task he performed around the station. For the first time since arriving, the work felt heavier. The lawsuit sat in the back of his mind like a storm cloud. Every repair, every cleaned shelf, every improvement suddenly seemed temporary. Why rebuild something that might be taken away? Logan noticed. He didn't mention it, not directly. But Caleb caught him watching several times. The younger man had seen that look before. Every veteran recognized it eventually, the moment someone started carrying too much weight alone. Boone noticed too. The German shepherd stayed unusually close, even while his shoulder continued healing. If Caleb walked to the garage, Boone followed. If Caleb crossed the lot, Boone limped behind him. At one point, the dog simply sat beside him while he stared at a stack of legal paperwork. Neither moved for almost 20 minutes. The silence somehow helped. By afternoon, dark clouds had rolled across the mountains again. Rain tapped against the garage roof. Logan was sorting tools near the back wall. Caleb was cataloging old inventory. Boone wandered slowly between them, then suddenly stopped. The dog's ears lifted, his head tilted. Once, twice. Something had caught his attention. He moved toward an old steel storage cabinet, the one sitting against the rear garage wall. The same cabinet nobody had touched since Caleb arrived. Boone sniffed around it, then scratched. Once. Caleb barely looked up. The dog scratched again, harder. Logan glanced over. "What's he doing?" "No idea." Boone barked. One sharp bark, then another. The same bark he'd used when discovering the hidden compartment behind the counter. Caleb slowly stood. A strange feeling crept through him. The dog wasn't chasing a mouse, wasn't playing. This was different. Boone pressed his nose against the concrete beside the cabinet, then scratched again, relentlessly. Despite the healing shoulder, despite the discomfort, he refused to stop. "Easy, partner." The dog ignored him. Logan moved beside Caleb. "You think he found something?" "I think he's trying to tell us something." Together they pulled the heavy cabinet away from the wall. Dust exploded into the air. Spiderwebs stretched across the gap behind it. Nothing obvious. At first. Then Caleb noticed it. A narrow seam in the concrete block wall, almost invisible. The kind of thing most people would overlook. His pulse quickened. Boone immediately sat beside it, watching, waiting, exactly the way he had before every previous discovery. Caleb grabbed a flashlight. The beam revealed a small, recessed handle hidden beneath years of grime. He pulled. Nothing. The panel remained locked. Logan crouched beside him. "There's definitely something back there." Caleb studied the mechanism. Old, rusty, mechanical. Then his hand moved instinctively toward his pocket. The brass key. The same key Boone had dug from beneath the counter days earlier. His heart began to pound. No way. Logan looked confused. "What?" Caleb already knew. The key slid into a hidden lock. Perfect fit. One turn. A metallic click echoed through the garage. Both men froze. Then the panel swung open. A narrow compartment stretched deep inside the wall. Waterproof containers. Document tubes, folders, boxes, all untouched, all preserved. For several seconds nobody spoke. Even Boone remained silent, as though he understood the importance of the moment. Caleb carefully lifted the first container. Inside sat property records, original deeds, survey maps, county filings, everything organized with Earl Turner's meticulous handwriting. The deeper they searched, the more astonishing it became. Every legal document connected to the station, every ownership transfer, every tax record. Decades worth of evidence. Then Caleb found something else, a folder marked private. His hands slowed. Inside were copies of letters, business correspondence, offers to purchase the station. One name appeared repeatedly. Victor Hale. Caleb stared. Offer after offer. Year after year. Victor had tried to buy the property long before Earl died. Each offer larger than the last. Each rejected. A handwritten note from Earl sat clipped to the final proposal, not for sale, never will be. Caleb felt a chill despite the warm garage. Victor hadn't suddenly become interested. He'd been trying for years. The station wasn't a new target. It was an old obsession. Logan read over his shoulder. "That's not good. No. It isn't." Then Boone barked again. Both men turned. The dog stood beside another waterproof tube, one they hadn't opened yet. Caleb removed the cap. A rolled bundle of papers slid out. More legal documents. And one sealed envelope. Unlike everything else, it had a name written across the front. Caleb. His father's handwriting. His breath caught. The garage seemed to disappear. Rain continued striking the roof overhead. Boone sat beside him, waiting. Caleb carefully opened the envelope. The letter inside had yellowed with age. The first line hit him immediately. "If you're reading this, then Boone found what I hoped nobody else ever would." Caleb stared, then looked down at the German shepherd. Boone wagged his tail once. The old veteran laughed despite himself, a rough, disbelieving sound. His father had never met Boone. The dog hadn't even been born yet. Yet somehow the sentence felt right. Caleb returned to the letter. Earl explained everything. The repeated offers, the pressure, the growing interest in the land. Victor Hale's attempts to acquire the station. Most importantly, Earl explained why he had hidden the documents. He believed someone would eventually challenge ownership after his death. Maybe not immediately, but someday. He wanted proof preserved, proof no one could alter, no one could destroy, no one could steal. At the bottom of the letter appeared another name, a lawyer, Evelyn Brooks. Beneath it, a handwritten note. If trouble ever comes, find Evelyn. She knows the rest. The garage fell silent. Outside, thunder rolled across the Wyoming mountains. Inside, hope returned for the first time in days. Victor Hale had spent years preparing his move, but Earl Turner had spent years preparing for it too. And thanks to a stubborn old German shepherd who refused to stop digging, Caleb finally held the truth in his hands. The storm lingered through the night. Rain hammered the garage roof. Thunder rolled across the Wyoming mountains. Yet for the first time in days, Caleb slept. Not well, not deeply, but enough. The letter from his father rested on the nightstand beside the bed upstairs. He read it 3 times before finally turning out the light. Each time he reached the same name, Evelyn Brooks. Find Evelyn. She knows the rest. By sunrise, the storm had passed. The mountains looked scrubbed clean. Fresh snow dusted the highest peaks. Boone stood at the apartment window watching the valley below. His shoulder had improved enough that the limp was barely noticeable now. Caleb scratched behind his ears. Looks like we've got a road trip. The retired attorney lived in a small town nearly 2 hours away. Logan stayed behind to watch the station. Boone rode shotgun. The old Ford climbed through winding mountain roads beneath bright autumn skies. For long stretches, neither man nor dog made a sound. The letter sat folded in Caleb's jacket pocket. Every few miles he touched it unconsciously, as if confirming it was still there. By noon they reached a modest house overlooking a river valley. White siding, blue shutters, a small garden protected from deer by a handmade fence. Nothing about the property suggested wealth, or power, or courtroom victories. A woman in her late 60s opened the door before Caleb reached the porch. Tall, silver hair, sharp eyes, the kind of eyes that missed very little. She looked first at Boone, then at Caleb, then at the envelope in his hand. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, she asked a single question. "You're Earl Turner's son, aren't you?" Caleb blinked. Yes. Something changed in her expression. Not surprise. Recognition. Memory. She stepped aside. "You'd better come in." The living room walls held family photographs, graduations, birthdays, ordinary moments, the kind of pictures people kept when they valued people more than things. Evelyn Brooks listened quietly while Caleb explained everything. The station, Victor Hale, the lawsuit, the attack, the hidden compartment, the letter. When he finally handed her Earl's note, she read it slowly. Very slowly. By the time she finished, her eyes glistened. She removed her glasses, looked toward the window, and for a moment appeared much older. "Your father saved my son." The words came softly, almost like a confession. Caleb said nothing. Evelyn folded the letter carefully. 23 years earlier, her son had needed emergency surgery. Insurance denied coverage. The cost was impossible. She had exhausted every option, every loan, every favor, every resource. Then somehow the hospital received an anonymous payment, enough to cover everything. Nobody ever claimed responsibility. Nobody ever took credit. Years later, she discovered the truth. Earl Turner, a gas station owner from the mountains, a man she'd met only twice, a man who quietly changed her family's future. He never wanted anyone to know. Evelyn smiled sadly. That's how I knew it was him. For the first time since arriving at the station, Caleb felt something loosen inside him. Another piece of the puzzle. Another life touched by his father. Another debt that had survived decades. Evelyn stood, walked toward a bookshelf, removed several legal volumes, then turned back toward Caleb. I'm retired. He nodded. I figured. I haven't entered a courtroom in 6 years. Caleb waited. Evelyn smiled. But I'm making an exception. Relief hit so suddenly, Caleb almost laughed. Almost. Instead, he looked down at Boone. The German shepherd's tail thumped softly against the floor, as if he'd known all along. The next 3 days became a blur. Evelyn moved like someone 20 years younger. Property records, historical filings, survey maps, ownership chains. Every document Boone had discovered inside the wall compartment became evidence. Every letter, every deed, every rejected purchase offer from Victor Hale. The case grew stronger by the hour. Victor's position weaker. Then Boone found trouble again. 2 nights before the hearing, Caleb stepped outside after closing the station. The air carried the sharp scent of approaching winter. Boone froze halfway across the lot. His ears lifted. The reaction was immediate, instinctive. Caleb recognized it instantly. The dog had detected something. A vehicle sat on the road beyond the property. Dark-colored, engine off, watching. The same feeling returned. Observation, surveillance, contact. Boone growled. Caleb quietly raised his phone. The vehicle remained still long enough. Just long enough. One photograph, then another. The license plate appeared clearly in the image. A moment later, the vehicle accelerated away, disappearing into darkness. The next morning, Evelyn ran the plate through public business records. The vehicle belonged to a subsidiary company owned by Victor Hale. That discovery changed everything. Now they had evidence, not proof of the attack, but proof of continued harassment, proof of interest, proof of intent. The case folder grew thicker. The hearing approached. On the evening before court, Caleb sat alone on the station porch. The mountains glowed orange beneath the setting sun. Boone rested beside him. The old dog seemed content, at peace. Caleb wished he felt the same. Tomorrow would decide everything. The station, the land, his father's legacy, perhaps even the future he had begun building here. The wind moved softly through the pines. Boone lifted his head, watching the fading horizon, always watching, always guarding. Caleb rested a hand on the dog's neck. One more fight, partner. The German shepherd leaned gently against him. The courthouse hearing was only 3 days away, and for the first time since Victor Hale entered the story, Caleb Turner believed they might actually win. The morning of the hearing arrived cold and clear. Frost covered the grass around the station. The mountains stood beneath a pale blue sky. Boone sat beside the truck while Caleb locked the station door. The German shepherd's shoulder had healed enough that only a slight stiffness remained when he first stood up. To anyone else, it would have been invisible. Caleb noticed it immediately. Old soldiers paid attention to small things. The drive into town felt strangely quiet. No nightmares, no radio, no unnecessary conversation. Just the hum of tires on asphalt and Boone's steady breathing from the passenger seat. When the courthouse finally appeared, Caleb felt the familiar tightening in his chest. Not fear, preparation. The same feeling he used to get before entering uncertain territory overseas. Gather information. Control what you can. Adapt to what you can't. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than he expected. Wooden benches, fluorescent lights, a state flag in one corner. Nothing dramatic. Nothing impressive. Yet somehow it felt like the most important room he had entered in years. Victor Hale sat at the front beside two attorneys. Expensive suits, expensive briefcases, confident smiles. Victor looked exactly as he had at the station. Calm, certain, as though the outcome had already been decided. When he noticed Caleb, he offered a polite nod, the kind a businessman might give before signing a contract, not before trying to take someone's future. Evelyn Brooks arrived carrying 2 boxes of documents. The retired attorney moved with quiet confidence, not arrogance, experience. She placed the boxes on counsel's table and smiled at Caleb. Ready? As I'll ever be. The hearing began. Victor's attorneys spoke first. They argued ownership complications, inheritance questions, potential claims connected to historical land agreements. The language sounded impressive, complicated, technical. But as Caleb listened, something felt off. There was a lot of talking, very little proof. Then Evelyn stood. The room changed, not dramatically, subtly, like watching a seasoned mechanic open the hood after everyone else spent hours guessing. She began with the original deed, then the county filings, then the ownership chain. Every document Earl had protected, every record Boone had helped uncover, one piece at a time, one fact at a time. No theatrics, no grand speeches, just evidence. The judge examined each document carefully. Questions followed. Answers followed. The truth remained consistent. Victor's attorneys began shifting strategies, then abandoning them, then reaching for new ones. The pattern became obvious. The case wasn't getting stronger. It was unraveling. Finally, Evelyn presented the hidden correspondence, the purchase offers, the repeated attempts by Victor Hale to acquire the property years before Earl's death. The courtroom grew noticeably quieter. The judge studied the documents, then looked directly at Victor. Mr. Hale, were these offers made by your company? Victor hesitated. Only briefly, yes. The answer seemed harmless. It wasn't. The documents established a history, a motive, an interest stretching back more than a decade. The exact thing Victor had tried to minimize. Then came the photograph Caleb had taken. The vehicle parked near the station. The license plate connected to Victor's company. Not enough to prove criminal activity. Enough to establish ongoing pressure. Enough to damage credibility. Victor's confidence finally cracked. Only slightly. But Caleb saw it. Years of reading people had taught him that. A tightened jaw, a delayed response, eyes shifting toward attorneys searching for solutions. There weren't any left. The judge reviewed the final documents. The courtroom remained silent. Then came the ruling. Clear, direct, immediate. The inheritance was valid. Ownership was uncontested. The lawsuit lacked merit. The claim was dismissed in its entirety. Just like that. Months of pressure vanished in a few sentences. Caleb didn't react immediately. For a moment, he simply sat there, listening, making sure he had heard correctly. Beside him, Boone rested beneath the bench. Calm. Steady. As if the dog had known all along. Outside the courthouse, sunlight warmed the stone steps. Evelyn shook Caleb's hand. Your father prepared well. Caleb nodded. He always seemed to. He helped a lot of people. The retired attorney smiled. Turns out some of them remembered. After she left, Caleb stood alone for a moment, watching people move through the square. Cars, pedestrians, ordinary life continuing. Victor emerged several minutes later. No attorneys now, no confident smile. Just a man standing quietly on the courthouse steps. He approached slowly. Neither spoke at first. The silence lasted nearly 30 seconds. Finally, Victor looked toward the mountains, then back at Caleb. When did you become this person? The question surprised him, not because of the words, because Victor genuinely seemed confused. Caleb thought about it. About Iraq, about sleeping in his truck, about Boone, about Earl, about the station. Then he answered, I was always this person. Victor waited. Caleb looked toward Boone. The German shepherd stood beside him, watching, faithful as ever. I just forgot for a while. Victor stared at him, then nodded once. A tired nod. The kind people give when they finally understand something too late. Without another word, he walked away. The drive home felt different, lighter. The mountains looked brighter somehow, or maybe Caleb simply noticed them again. When the station finally appeared around the bend, Logan was waiting outside. He already knew. Small-town news traveled faster than radio signals. You won. Caleb smiled. We won. That evening, as the sun disappeared behind the Wyoming peaks, Caleb walked to the breaker panel beside the garage. Dust covered the switches. Some hadn't been touched in years. He found the one labeled sign. Earl's handwriting remained visible beneath the grime. For a moment, Caleb simply stared at it. Then he flipped the switch. Nothing happened. A second passed. Then another. Suddenly, a warm glow flickered to life above the station. The old sign illuminated the gathering darkness. Faded. Weathered. Beautiful. Turner Gas and Service. The letters weren't perfect. Neither was the building. Neither was the man standing beneath it. But the light was on. For the first time in nearly 2 decades. Boone sat beside him, looking up at the sign. The evening wind moved softly through the pines. Customers would come tomorrow. Work would continue. Life would continue. And for the first time in a very long time, Caleb Turner wasn't wondering where he would sleep next month. He was home. 1 year later, winter returned to the Wyoming mountains. Snow covered the ridges. Frost painted the fence posts white each morning. And the old station no longer looked forgotten. The parking lot carried tire tracks almost every day. The fuel pumps worked. The garage doors opened at sunrise. The coffee pot started brewing before dawn. Life had returned. Not all at once. Not dramatically. One customer at a time. One repair at a time. One conversation at a time. Logan now managed most of the garage operations. The young man who had once slept inside a broken RV carried himself differently. Stronger. Steadier. He had completed his mechanic certification program. Customers specifically asked for him by name. The old garage stayed busy enough that several weeks were booked in advance. Caleb never expected that. Neither had Logan. Yet somehow the station had become exactly what Earl always believed it could be. A place people depended on. The apartment upstairs had changed too. The bare rooms now held furniture, photographs, books, a proper bed, small things, ordinary things, the kinds of things Caleb hadn't allowed himself to imagine when he was sleeping in his truck. His nightmares still came sometimes, less often now. Certain sounds still reached places inside him that time never fully healed. A slammed door, a distant siren, unexpected static from a radio. When those moments arrived, Boone was always there. The German Shepherd had grown grayer around the muzzle, a little slower, a little stiffer during cold mornings, but no less watchful, no less loyal. Every night he still checked the station before settling down. Every morning he still made his patrol around the property, as if the mission had become his too. One evening, shortly before Christmas, a blizzard arrived earlier than forecast. The snow began around sunset. By full darkness, visibility had nearly vanished. Wind pushed drifts across the road. The mountains disappeared behind swirling white curtains. Inside the station, the coffee pot remained warm. A checkerboard sat near the front window. The old sign glowed through the storm. Turner Gas and Service. Steady, bright, alive. Caleb sat behind the counter reading through one of Earl's notebooks. Boone slept nearby. The station felt peaceful. Then headlights appeared. Faint at first, barely visible through the snow. A vehicle, struggling. The engine sounded wrong. The SUV rolled into the lot and stopped beside the pumps. The driver's door opened. A young woman stepped out carrying a child. Another child followed behind her. Neither wore clothing suitable for the storm. Boone stood immediately. The woman looked exhausted, cold, embarrassed. The same expression Caleb had seen countless times inside Earl's journals, people carrying more than they could say. "We're sorry," she said. "Our gas light came on 20 miles ago." The younger child shivered violently. The wind howled around them. Caleb opened the door. "Get inside." No hesitation, no questions. The family stepped into the warmth. Boone walked over immediately. The younger child reached toward him. The German Shepherd gently sat beside her, close enough to comfort, not close enough to scare. The little girl wrapped both arms around his neck. Boone accepted the responsibility without complaint. Caleb smiled. Some things never changed. While Logan checked the SUV outside, Caleb made sandwiches, poured hot chocolate, found extra blankets. The children sat near the heater. Color slowly returned to their faces. Eventually, the woman approached the counter. She looked embarrassed, ashamed. "I don't have enough money for all of this." Caleb glanced toward the window. Snow continued falling heavily. Then he looked at Boone. The dog sat beside the children like a furry guardian, patient, steady, exactly the way he had sat beside Caleb countless times. The answer came easily, because it wasn't really his answer. It belonged to Earl, and now perhaps to him. "You can pay next time." The woman blinked. "What?" "Next time you're passing through." Her eyes filled with tears. Caleb simply shrugged. Logan entered from outside. The fuel line's frozen. The woman looked devastated. "How much will that cost?" Logan glanced at Caleb. Caleb smiled. "Nothing." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then the younger child laughed as Boone rolled onto his side and accepted a belly rub. The tension disappeared. The station felt warmer somehow. Later that night, after the family safely continued down the mountain road, Caleb locked the front door. Snow drifted quietly beyond the windows. The world had become white and silent. Boone settled beside the counter, tired, content. Caleb reached for Earl's reading glasses, the same pair that had been sitting there since the day he arrived. He cleaned the lenses with a soft cloth, then carefully placed them beside the old notebooks. Nearby sat a new ledger, his ledger. The first page was already filled with names, not debts, people, help given, repairs completed, fuel provided, small acts, quiet acts, the same kind Earl had recorded for decades. Caleb opened to a fresh page. The pen paused above the paper. Then he wrote, "Walker family. Full tank of gas. Fuel line repair. No charge." He stared at the words for a moment. Outside, the illuminated station sign glowed through the falling snow. Inside, Boone slept peacefully at his feet. The mountains beyond remained dark and endless, and suddenly, Caleb understood something that had taken him 72 years to learn. His father had never left him a Gaston. The building, the land, the garage, those were only tools. What Earl Turner had really left behind was a responsibility, a promise, a light that stayed on when other lights went dark, a place where people could stop, rest, recover, keep going. Caleb closed the ledger. The station creaked softly around him. Warm, alive, home. Outside, snow continued falling across the Wyoming mountains. Inside, the light remained on, and as long as Caleb Turner and Boone were there to guard it, it always would. Inside, the light remained on. If you believe kindness always comes back around, even years later, leave a simple one in the comments. And if you think Caleb's father left behind something far more valuable than money, leave it too. I read as many comments as I can, and I'd love to know where you stand. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. There are many more powerful stories of loyalty, courage, second chances, and the incredible bond between veterans and their faithful dogs waiting just ahead. Until the next story, take care of yourself, take care of the people you love, and remember, sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what someone leaves behind. It's the light they teach us to keep burning. Good night, and I'll see you in the next story.